Hello and thank you for joining in on today's training. Heart & Solutions is a proud provider of CE-eligible trainings for our counseling community. This training may be eligible for continuing education credit hours through either the National Board for Certified Counselors, provider number 7376, or the Association of Play Therapy, provider number 21-645. To obtain CE hours for today's training, be sure to follow the steps in the description below to find and take your quiz.
Hello, I'm Montana Meyer. I'm a mental health counselor who works with children from the age of 5. Today we'll be talking about the themes of play therapy for counselors to identify within the context of children's play behaviors, with consideration given to toy selection as well as indicators for meeting within the themes. These themes are what differentiates watching a child's play behaviors and conceptualizing the child presenting concerns. On today's agenda, we'll start off just talking about play, the importance of play within the therapeutic space, the themes of play, which is today's main category, as well as considering the indicators for meeting within the themes, as well as toy selection. And then we'll go through a case study together to practice those skills of identifying the themes, as well as indicators and toy selections that are interpreted in the meeting. So starting off with play is a very enjoyable activity. It's freely chosen and unconstrained for a child. It's a fun way to learn and grow, providing context to practice skills and roles needed for life. Play is the natural medium in which children can freely express themselves. Based on a child's interactions with the tools and toys that we provide, different themes may begin to show as the child tries to understand or make sense of events in their life. Play is the road to understanding children's conscious as well as unconscious world, learning their language, so to speak. As therapists, we can look for these themes within a child's play to interpret those behaviors that they're showing us. A play behavior is what's acted out by the child in the playroom, and a variation of meanings can be attributed to those play behaviors. It's what they're actually doing. And the play theme is a coherent metaphor from which the child communicates the meaning that he or she attributes to their experience. And so that's where our clinical skills come into it, is identifying that theme. And so recognizing themes is a complex process. It involves an understanding of child development, their typical milestones, and different meanings can be built around the theoretical model that you're using. And so these themes are the ones that you'll primarily see or are very common in the playroom, but can also be slightly different depending on if you use a psychodynamic, person-centered, or emotion-focused, or other modalities as well. And the model identifies really the conceptualization beyond the theme and what's going on with them, how you can help them through the phases of treatment, how you use those therapeutic powers of play to help them access healing. It's more than just this behavior equals this theme. And play is the way in which psychological and socio-emotional issues they're going through or areas where they're getting stuck can be seen, where they may be struggling to work through all their developmental stages so they can grow and mature into well-functioning adults. There are a variety of psychological and social emotional roots to these play themes, so you'll need to pay close attention to what your client is doing in their play therapy sessions, as well as what they're saying, to get a sense of what your client is working to resolve. At the end of this presentation, you'll be able to identify these following 5 common themes and understand their significance within children's self-expression. These themes are not exhaustive at all, and children can present with more than one theme at a time. The themes can shift from time to time throughout that therapeutic environment as well. And so making sure to just keep these in mind and not just this behavior equals this theme in the big picture. Starting off with the theme of power and aggression. Developmentally, when working with school-age children, a big part of their developmental stage is working through issues with goodness and badness. It's something that we all have to come to terms with, and we usually come to terms with it starting in childhood. People are not all good or all bad, and that's part of what they're learning is, am I not all good and not all bad, and is that okay? and kind of answering that question of what is goodness, what is badness, how do I fit into both, what's okay, what's not okay. We can also see power and aggression within themes of grief and loss. There is a pain in grief, and there's anger as one of the stages of grief. And sometimes this manifests as aggression within the playroom. And the loss of control, really, in grief comes up with that power differential. And it may show up as helplessness or wanting to gain that internal sense of control through their play behaviors. Overall, kind of looking at the locus of control issues, we have that external and internal locus of control, and it affects emotional regulation. And with children, initially that emotional regulation and locus of control is external. Children need adults in their life to externally help them regulate the emotions they may be experiencing, and learning how to comply with boundaries as well, limit setting. Eventually, the goal is children internalize that self-control and have the ability to inhibit their own behaviors, regulate their own emotions. And that's also where we may see those feelings of helplessness come up with their emotions. They may want you to externally, regulate their emotions in that, because that's what they may expect within the playroom since you are an adult. Another one of those issues is fairness in life. A very common thing that children work through at the school age. Life is not fair sometimes, and that is just our reality. And how do you manage that is really the question for children of, this is our reality, what do I do about it? And part of what children have to work through, and adults as well, is figuring out that unfairness and the possible anger that may surround that, learning how to come to terms with that. What do I and don't I have control of in my life? And sometimes life does not go the way that we want to, as I'm sure everyone can relate to. Sometimes it's unfair, and there may be anger around that. The next theme we'll look at is nurturance and meeting needs. This is a common theme that involves children exploring, how do I get my basic as well as emotional needs met? Having children who experience poverty, food insecurity, homelessness, you may see this as a theme that shows up regularly early on in the play therapy process. And it's an indicator that basic needs probably weren't met. The family may be struggling. And sometimes you see emotional needs wrapped into that as well, of, how do I get these needs met? Like, essentially really answering that question of, do I matter? Do my needs matter? If my needs are not met consistently, it feels like they may not be important. And so this may come up commonly in the play therapy space. When it comes to the theme of safety and security, a lot of it surrounds anxiety. And children struggling with anxiety, fearfulness, this theme shows up because essentially anxiety is, my inability to feel safe and secure in my environment. And really those questions of, can I expect things to be okay? Can I expect myself to be okay? My loved ones to be okay? Will things work out for me? Will we be okay? Things that underlie anxiety. And another piece of that is, how do they deal with that distress? If I'm feeling anxious about myself being okay, or worrying about something bad happening to me, what do I do with that distress? It's really something that a child may be working through within this theme. And, is this bad? Am I not okay? I'm not safe. And helping them to contain that, learn how to tolerate stress, reduce their anxiety, look at things in a different way, feel safe, feel that their loved ones are safe, is really that part of that process surrounding anxiety within the safety and security theme. This can be seen a lot with kids who experience trauma. And essentially, trauma destroys our ability to feel safe and secure. You may see a lot of safety and security themes over time when there's been a traumatic experience. How do they navigate through that and find a sense of, I'm capable, I'm safe? after a traumatic experience that may have taken that safety away. And this is also where they could be working through some anger, also within the safety and security theme as well. And it's kind of a reminder that a variety of themes can show up in the playroom, and observing how they change over time, how anger and safety and security may be affecting each other, how they both may be showing up, and how they shift, and what facilitates those shifts that they may be going through with each. The next theme is exploration and mastery. This is a huge theme for self-esteem building, the sense of I can and I'm capable. If you think about, Erickson's stage of socio-emotional development, the school age development process is really that industry versus inferiority question. And, questioning if they're capable of things. Can I do this when they meet a challenge? What does it mean about them if they can or cannot, explore that challenge, solve their problems? This generally surrounds their beliefs about themselves and building that positive self-concept. Do they have a positive view of themselves within their behaviors? Do they, use characters that are positive in themselves, confident in themselves? Or do they show a generally negative self-concept, doubting themselves, not believing in themselves within the scenes that they create? And the play therapy process can be really a space for problem solving and, using creative ideas or solutions to solve problems that they may be going through. For example, some kids have difficulties with friendships, and so you'll notice through their play behaviors they're really working through, this is a problem I have in real life, and so I'm going to bring it to this space and kind of discover ways I could solve this through the scenes they recreate. It may be, with dolls or with other, animal characters where they have a conflict, and really recognizing, does the character in distress feel that they're capable of solving it? What is their problem solving solutions to the conflict? And one thing that I feel is helpful with this theme and general self-esteem building is not jumping to solve problems for kids in the play therapy room. It's what we as adults do. Kids go to adults to help fix or solve their problems because they trust us. And, they have that external locus of control, and adults often solve those problems. But I think in the playroom, if you give them that opportunity, you can see how they use that creative process in play to figure things out. Now, if they get to a point where they really need help, of course, jump in, but not automatically. And sometimes they may not want you to, and kids will definitely express that if they don't want you involved. Part of what you're looking for is, do they give up in that problem solving? Do they, have an aspect of helplessness or powerlessness, or do they give it a try? It really gives us an indication to their window of distress tolerance within this theme. Some kids have their distress tolerance very limited and a very small window where they give up really quickly or look to you as the adult in the room for help. And other kids with a more positive self-concept, or that I'm capable mentality, work to try to solve it first. And you'll really notice that come out within this theme. The last theme that we're going to look at is the interaction theme. This theme is all about connection, attachment, and belonging. Really, those relationships is a big one that can come out in this. And the aspect of this theme is showing children's understanding and how they interact with others. This can include adult relationships, peer relationships as well as your relationship with them can really come out in this theme. Recognizing how do they navigate through those interactions. The interactions with you will be very point blank, but within their play behaviors, how are they showing different characters interact, or different relationships that they create What is the connection? What is the sense of belonging within the scenes they're creating? And how do they see themselves in those interactions? This theme has a lot to do as well with self-esteem, but self-esteem within who they are in their connections, recognizing that, are they primarily positive or negative thoughts with themselves as they see themselves in interactions? If they identify a character as themselves through verbal communication with you, how are they, how are they presenting themselves within the interaction? Do they show confidence? Do they show hesitance? And what are they thinking, or what are they really showing that they're thinking within themselves through those interactions and play behaviors? The question really being answered through children's interactions is, am I loved? Am I lovable? Do I belong? Am I accepted or valued within relationships? And you see these a lot in the way that relationships may manifest within their behaviors. A lot of times, you'll see this in doll play, dollhouse, through puppets as well. The way characters get played out, what kind of stories are they telling through those relationships or relationship dynamics? You can also see it within their art. There's different ways that they use the play therapy process to show those themes and really show those relationships. And it can span through a whole bunch of modalities in which they create. You're looking here to understand how they interact with peers, and watching through the process, watching how they play people, or watching how they interact through kind of similar hierarchies, similar power differentials. The relationship of somebody having more power and less power is most likely that, child parent, adult child relationship. But equals, you may notice that they're working through those peer relationships, and their experience of what they're trying to figure out about their relationships or interactions outside of the play therapy space. Peer relationships, working through those challenges, you'll typically see these showing up because the older school-age children are really focused on their relationships. That becomes important to them, and that increased distance from family relationships is going to show up. And so this theme is a very common one with older school-age children. The way they interact with you is something that I find really beneficial about this theme, and can be really crucial to recognizing this theme. Do they, do they engage you right away? Do they keep you at a distance? Do they give you an idea of what's going on through their verbal communications? And you get a sense of their personality within that interaction to a degree, how they work through things. That sense of their tolerance for distress comes up again within the relationship context. And are they slow to warm up to people? Do they build relationships and trust quickly? Do they feel the ability to work through problems within relationships, or figure out that trust, which can look very different for different people? And looking at how they engage with you, are they presenting with more of a solitary play? Are they, engaging you? What is your engagement? Do you often play equals? Do you often play a higher power differential? Are you the powerful one in the relationship? And, this can also change over time. And I think this theme comes into play with children working through that attachment or belonging sense of how they're attaching to you, or how they feel connected to you in the relationship. And for example, a child may be really solitary in their play in the beginning. I've seen before where children go off into the corner and they do their thing. They don't interact at all. And, you play more of an observer role. in that beginning, and when does it shift that they involve you or at least tell you what's going on? It can be a really significant thing within this theme when they even start to have that verbal communication of this is what I'm doing, or at least kind of giving you something about what they're doing, even though you may be asking in the beginning, they may not be telling you. So when do they start telling you or calling out what they're doing? When do they start having you play characters or you be involved physically in that? Now that we've identified, the 5 common themes, it's very apparent that there's some overlap within children's play. They can show up with multiple themes going on at once through their behaviors. And what I find helpful in distinguishing these themes within the sense of conceptualization is looking at these following 6 indicators for meaning. And so the indicators are things that we as counselors look for both in the moment as well as through sessions over time, I think is a really big piece of what you're going to see through these indicators. Starting off with repetition and similar toy selection. This is a very long-term indicator, looking at patterns of what toys are they picking up. Now that might shift from session to session, but are they in the same category of toy? Are they different categories, but they may be showing the same storyline within the scenes they're creating? Looking at the big picture of what stays the same, what's different about the sessions. If you notice them going for the same toys, looking further into that. How does that toy or this category of toys help them show us what they're working through? What draws them to this same toy over and over? And you may experience where they've been picking the same toys week after week for a long time, and then all of a sudden they choose a completely different category or a different toy altogether. And there's a kind of that question of, whoa, this is a little flag for me, and what changed? Next is the amount of time spent with the toy. This one can be difficult to track for some children, as it may be attributed to things external to the actual theme or as an indicator. For example, with children with ADHD, that attention span or distractibility may be what's coming into play with the amount of time spent with their toy, but it can also, be an indicator of something else going on, or give us, kind of meaning to what they're thinking, what they're understanding, what their experience with the playroom is in general. And it really shows the importance of toys within what they're conveying. Noticing, are they switching 10 times during the hour? Do they sometimes stick with the same toy or same categories of toys for a whole session length? What does it mean to their story? Do they bring in a whole bunch of toys for one story? Do they focus on 1 or 2 for a story? What keeps their attention on things? If they keep switching and switching and switching, all of a sudden we're noticing that we're having lengthier amount of time spent with a specific toy or category of toys. What does that mean? If the same story is going on with the same toys for an entire hour, what does that really mean to us? What does it mean to the child or what they may be working through? This can help us as clinicians navigate their mind a little bit more, understanding what's important to them, what are they drawn to, what does it mean to the big picture? Child-directed transitions to end or change the play is one that comes pretty significantly as an indicator, as play therapy in a whole can be it's all really child-directed, if that is the model that you're using. And it's a model that I lead on a lot. And so that child-directed play in general, really comes up in the indicators focusing on what are the transitions or what are the changes within that model that you're using. And so really it's that non-directive approach that's essential, and allows the child to explore things as they desire. And I think that that can enlighten us to understanding them more and noticing that these indicators give us a clearer picture of how they may be feeling during the sessions. What was happening when they stopped, playing, or they decided to end or just completely shift up the play. Was the story completed? Did they talk about something and then drop the subject and move on? Maybe an indicator for avoidance or something that they may be stuck with. And or maybe just feeling uncomfortable talking about it when creating a storyline or playing out something that they may want to get rid of, those uncomfortable emotions that came up during the scene. Another aspect of the child, redirection that's important is their involvement of you in that play. Like I said before, within that interaction theme, it's really that indicator of changing play and seeing their directions on how the play, is created. Are they, solitary? Does the behavior of, solitary or involving you depend on which toys, the day, the scenes they're creating, just to play that day? Are there, patterns to when they involve you, when things may be more solitary for them? And, one thing is that I think is important within those transition is what precipitates it. Taking note of, was this triggered by something else? Is this an attempt to internally, emotionally regulate? Within the aggression, power and aggression theme, you may notice that it's really energetic, and it's a lot of energy and up with battles and different fights within that aggression that they may be creating. And so are they switching to maybe come back to a sense of calm, or are they switching because they hit something emotionally, and kind of what they were doing when they shifted? How long did they sustain that play before they needed to shift or wanted to shift? Thinking about what's going on, what is their focus within the room, and does that focus shift as well? That distractibility can come up with those transitions, but it also gives an idea of what's going on with them, and you want to keep track of that movement for them, as it can apply to the themes. It can also apply to just understanding them, how they interact with things in their world as well. So the next three indicators for meaning, starting off with the focus on toys promoting creativity. I feel that taking note of the types of toys they gravitate towards is, something important. And we'll get more into the toy selection process, but the ones, promoting creativity, this indicator dives into the understanding that we get behind creative toys, such as, Legos, blocks, sticks, drawings, things that don't have a meaning already, things that really enhance the imagination, can be very insightful into what they're creating out of nothing, so to say. For example, I've seen a child who consistently created cars, and it did not matter what we were using. It could be Legos, it could be drawings, it could be anything that he had with it. And cars are a completely normal item for kids to create, and maybe just be interested in cars. Looking further into that pattern, that indicator, and really focusing on that, in our space, we discovered, that focus on cars was very much connected to the interaction theme. And it was a connection to someone that he admired in his life, and, really affected his self-view through cars. Cars was a big part of his personality and his understanding of himself, because he wanted to be like the person he admired. And so recreating those cars and keeping that focus to kind of gain connection with that adult in his life. And the importance of that relationship within his self-esteem was something that we found. And so kind of just an example of looking further into those patterns within kids' natural imagination to further understand them and meet them where they are. The next indicator, similar emotions or ideas despite the toys changing. So as we talked about, before in repetition or similar toy selection, you can also see similar emotions or stories being created throughout different categories. And so using different toys to play out the same idea or experiencing the same emotions. For example, toy characters or toys experiencing tragedies over and over and over, and kind of the repeat of the emotions of grief or loss, such as sadness, anger, being consistent despite the idea or the play or whatever toys they're using, can really show that this is where they're getting stuck, or this is the emotions that are important for them to work out within the play therapy space. And noticing how emotions may be coming up within the session as well. Is there a coherence to their emotions or connection with the emotions? Or are they showing, happiness when they kill off a character or defeat you within the play, space? Do those emotions really match the situation, or do they not match the situation? Representing past, present, or future life as an indicator is really looking at play on the broad scope. What are they essentially playing out? This may require some insight into, the verbal communication in just more than their nonverbal communication, as we don't live in their shoes. We don't know everything about their lives within that space. And so kind of requires them, you tracking them through that verbal communication of what scene are you playing out? Is this, something that they're recreating a past experience they had, or a current experience, or difficulty they're experiencing now in real life? Or is it things like pretend play as adults? And, is it something that they are representing themselves as older, younger, age consistent? This indicator lets us know where their mind is at. Are they, constantly stuck on this future thinking? Are they, working through the things that are present in their life, or are they stuck in the past? Are they recreating this thing that may have happened, or this experience they may have had that they're struggling to process? This indicator can be really big of, where is my mind stuck at out of the three? And children have vast imagination, so this can be interpreted a lot of ways, and really involves us being inquisitive with them about what they're playing out in front of us. Moving on to toy selection. Now, toys are very powerful in finding symbolic possibilities. Not all toys are created equal, and there is therapeutic value to the toys that you choose for your playroom for them to pick from. And there's nurturing toys, there's aggressive toys, fantasy, role-playing, constructive toys, a lot of different categories that have different symbolic meanings. But I do want to preface this section with, kids are imaginative, and today's section is really just about noticing the connection between the toys and the themes. But I do want to preface by saying this isn't an exact match. So if a child comes in and they pick up swords, for example, it doesn't mean that they're always going to be in the power and aggression theme, but it is more of just a mental little flag to bring up of, this theme may be coming up. And so that's where I'm going to, something I'm going to keep in mind, but paying attention to how they're using the toys. And, most importantly, you are the most important toy in the room. The relationship you create with the child is the therapeutic vehicle in which drives the space. And so I know there's a lot of toys listed here, and there are a million resources for the perfect playroom to have, but really recognizing that children are very creative individuals who can use various toys to create what they need. It is surprising how kids can use different things to create what they need. And this next part, acknowledging how toys relate and helping give clues to those possible themes to be keeping in mind as you observe their play behaviors. Starting off with power and aggression. So aggressive toys can be very helpful to have in the play therapy space. It allows children to engage in their anger. Having toys like Nerf guns, rubber knives, handcuffs allows them the tools to explore it through their anger in the scenes they create in a very direct way. Scenes that they may create with these toys, observable is, the classic like good guy versus bad guy, superhero mentality, good versus evil occurring within that, as well as, the oppressor versus the oppressed. Is that power differential really coming up through the characters that they're playing out? Dying, death is a common one when they're working through that grief and loss, characters dying to violence or, death occurring within the scenes, as well as devouring that can occur with animals. Seeking authority, leadership, power can give an insight into what is that power differential that the child may be experiencing outside of the play therapy space. And, what does seeking power look like through their play? Other scenes they can create is, the strong versus weak, or just generalized aggression as well can come out, and can be shown through those play behaviors that they use with these toys. The nurturing and meeting needs, common toys. A big one is like food and kitchen stuff, as well as, puppets and like human-like characters. And, a big thing is we use food to sustain us, to keep us alive. But we also use food for comfort. For example, when we're sick, we use food for comfort. And we can also use food in unhealthy ways, still trying to find nurturing, comfort, meeting needs. And so a big aspect of this is, how are the toys being used? Because, if a child is showing, a mother, feeding her child is a very different, scene to this character is using food to comfort themselves, or maybe in an unhealthy manner. Those two scenes can relate to very different themes going on and very different ideas or experiences the child may be working through. Through this nurturing and meeting needs, with this group of toys, you'll see a lot of different things possibly being played out, such as like the parent, guardian, or caregiver role nurturing or meeting the needs or not meeting the needs of the child, or younger, less power character within the scene, as well as attachment, detachment of really the lack of through this scene can be seen, with the need, the emotional need aspect. And is there an attachment with the characters? You'll commonly see that characters are in conflict, or there isn't that secure attachment being shown through those relationships within this theme. You can also see things such as self-nurturance of, they may be, using items like you see on the screen now of play food to feed themselves, or they may be, cooking up for themselves or cooking for you within the playroom, and really showing how do they take care of themselves with something basic to our needs, such as food, and as well as that affection for others. Are they nurturing you through these toys? Are they cooking for you? Are they taking care of you through those interactions? The safety and security theme has a ton of different toys, and these are just a few examples. And so with toys such as like medical kits, play money, even the food items as well can come into safety and security. You can take note of how children work through their anxiety surrounding their safety and control of their environment. What are the emotions that are going on when they're saving a patient or paying for items? Do they create scenes where there's a sense of panic? Do things turn out well in their stories, or do they often have sad endings that don't go so well? Other scenes you can see within the safety and security really comes to, fire, disasters, having to escape something, danger, rescuing people, drowning, burying as well. Doctor-centered play therapy can be very much seen through the use of like a medical kit, play medical kit, of course, as you see on the screen. And fixing, repairing things, protecting as well as a big one through this theme and these toys. And so they can act out a lot of different things within this, and a lot of those you can see is like scary environments, and things that would bring a sense of anxiety, panic, fight or flight response with them, as well as things like play money is something that comes up a lot within children with food insecurity or low socioeconomic status of how are they spending money. Do they spend money very like loosely, or are they quite tight with it, or bargaining or hiding money? Things like that can really show how they view these things that we use more commonly in the adult world. What's their understanding of the security within financial or just well-being sectors? When it comes to exploration and mastery, these are really the creative toys, such as games. This is where like the sand or sand tray comes into play as well. Drawings, and they allow for a lot of imagination and creativity. This is those creative tools where they can also show their skills, and that can involve a variety of things. So other toys that they can include within this theme is things that they enjoy using or practice using as well. My work in telehealth play, which is becoming more prominent post-COVID as well. I mean, this extends very far because you're primarily working with the toys that they have around them. And for example, using the telehealth to your advantage as a clinician, allowing children to show you how they do something that they're good at, I find is a very bonding moment, as well as allowing them to explore their mastery through an item. For example, I have had children show me how they do a lot of things. For example, how they put together a fishing pole, or how they made a robot at camp. It's a wide scope of things and things that they're good at. Sports, different creations that they make, the things that they feel confident and competent in doing can really give insight into that mastery perspective and their self-esteem. This can also include things like, are they cheating to win when you may play games together, or what are their emotions around winning and losing? Do they, are they okay with losing, or does that, put them into, a dysregulated emotions when they lose things, because they may feel, unconfident in themselves, insecure in themselves. And this also involves that sensory or environment exploration within this theme of just how do they interact with different things like Play-Doh, sand, things like that. That sensory environment exploration can really be seen. How do they interact with their world and kind of solving their interactions through this theme in like, can I do this? Or how do I interact with my environment confidently? Or do I interact with things maybe unconfidently? Like I'm a little nervous to explore this part of my environment. Like how do they really engage with the toys in your room in general? What do they lean on in this? And lastly, in interaction themes, we're really looking at aspects of self-acceptance, rejection, connection, attachment, belonging. And so how they engage in relationships, most often in that dollhouse style is where you'll notice those interactions, how they mirror their engagement with peers, adults, through lifelike characters in toys. This theme, also requires, you within this, as stated before, how are you playing the different dolls, animals, puppets that may be coming up? Are you engaged within the dollhouse? Like, are you playing a character? Are you not playing a character? Are they just doing things themselves? And, things that can be seen through these scenes is that like self-acceptance or maybe characters rejecting one another, positive as well as negative interactions that may, be a sign of the things that they're playing out through their life experiences and maybe experiencing outside of the room. You also may see, boredom within those interactions of, what kinds of characters are they? Are there, characters who don't like some characters, or certain groups, cliques being made within those characters? How do they talk about the characters is a big thing that can show a lot about how a child's thinking through their play as well. And, I do want to say this list is not exhaustive whatsoever. Like I prefaced before, these are examples of toys used within these themes, but there is a big aspect in, your ability to pay attention to how they're using the toys within different themes. Food can be used in a nurturing way, like if they're making food for you or food for the dolls in their space. And on the contrary, kids can also show a power and control theme when possibly assigning like a chef or sous chef position, where they may be yelling orders or getting frustrated with the food play. And so keeping in mind that this is just a general, themes and how toys are involved, but really it requires those skills of you paying attention and you tracking those behaviors and how they're using these toys from different categories. Now to just go through a case study to practice these skills of theme identification and recognition of indicators of meaning and toy selection importance to themes. And so this case study, we have John, who is a 4-year-old male. And each week he comes to session and grabs 2 stuffed animals, the tigers. He acts out a scene in solitary of aggression with these 2 tigers, naming them Daddy Tiger and Baby Tiger. The scenes vary throughout sessions, but repetitively have the same ending, with Daddy Tiger becoming angry and being an aggressor to Baby Tiger. And, this is very consistent of it's a bad ending. It's an aggressive ending with Daddy Tiger kind of showing that aggression to Baby Tiger. And one day he involves the therapist in his play, and he acts out a scene with the tigers where Baby Tiger has to go to the hospital because of Daddy Tiger. And so the therapist is directed to be the panda stuffed animal, a new character who is very sad to hear about baby tiger. And so I'll give you a couple minutes with this to think about, what is the theme that's being shown throughout this play? What is the toy selection possibly mean or influence the theme? And what indicators are you noticing within this progression throughout this case study? Now that you've had a couple minutes to look through that case study, just kind of going through the themes, the toy selection, and indicators for meaning that really stand out from this case study. But the themes, there are a couple different themes that could apply in this situation. Really identifying aggression as a repetitive pattern in the story really tells that there's anger being expressed just over and over, as well as sadness being expressed related to the aggression as well. And the interaction theme presenting really relates to the relationship between the characters, identifying that power differential within the relationship. And toy selection here, he repetitively chooses tigers to represent the characters in this scene. That in itself is something to take note of and to explore deeper of why tigers, of all of the animals to pick from, tigers. And who do the tigers and the panda, who's new, represent in real life for this child, if anyone, would be something to look further into after this big change on that day. Indicators that show up to take note of within this study is the repetitive play and amount of time spent with these toys in particular, noticing that this child is experiencing some sort of block with this specific scene or story, the emotions around the scene, or something about this play that he's stuck on, which may not be very clear without that continued exploration through those patterns and verbal communication as well. And as well as the child directed changes in the scene that one day, really noticing him going from solitary play to involving the therapist with the addition of the new character that the therapist is playing, and new emotions of sadness, which can be a clue to something shifting for the child, because it was very consistent. And now there's a shift this day, either in his interpretation or what he's struggling with, or a change in the relationship with the clinician as well, may all be present within those indicators. And so, looking at these, you can see how each thing that we talked about really has you looking further into them. None of these are directly, this toy, this indicator, this theme, but rather noticing that flexibility within them and kind of need for those skills to look further, interpret things further. And just to wrap up today, we've explored the 5 common themes to child's play. And just a last reminder, this list is not exhaustive nor mutually exclusive. A child's play behaviors can have a multitude of meanings and themes associated. At the core, these themes really offer paths to further understanding and conceptualization of a child's life experiences related through their behaviors. And we've also explored the external influences to identifying themes, including toy selection, which again, not an exhaustive list, and children's imaginations allow for many toys to be used in a variety of ways. The toy selection we discussed today is merely a glimpse into possible themes at play in the moment, and do require that closer look to further our understanding of what we're observing. And we've also looked at those indicators of meaning, the behaviors that really show insight into how the child is processing within the space that you create for them, noticing the communications through their nonverbal behaviors that can enhance or dismantle our conceptualizations, which are ever shifting in the therapeutic space with children. Thank you.
Thank you for joining in on today's training. We look forward to having you join us again. Heart & Solutions is proud to provide CE-eligible trainings for our counseling community. This training may be eligible for continuing education credit hours through either the National Board for Certified Counselors, provider number 7376, or the Association of Play Therapy, provider number 21-645. To obtain CE hours for today's training, be sure to follow the steps in the description below.